Welcome back, everyone, to GGN. This is the last part 3 for today for Wednesday, October 23rd, 2013. I'm Darko. My website is ggnonline.net. And on YouTube, my channels are ddarko 2012 and 2013. Okay, some more kind of geopolitical news. This first article is kind of interesting because it has to do with the Russia's space defense forces. They're holding a missile exercise in South Russia. Russia's been getting attacked lately by terrorists in Dagestan there, in the Caucasus. Mostly it's usually the Salafi or Wahhabist Sunni terrorists being funded and backed and stuff like that by Saudi Arabia and the Gulf monarchies. Russian space defense forces will hold an exercise with the S-300 Favorite missile system in Southern Military District. 2-day exercises involving 700 servicemen, 50 combat vehicles, and 20 warplanes. Space cannons ready. Japan to shoot asteroids for samples in 2014 mission. A unique space cannon developed for Japan's Hayabusa 2 spacecraft has successfully test-fired on Earth in preparation for the 2014 mission. During its upcoming journey into space, the cannon will blast an asteroid and mine samples of its soil. This is from today, the 23rd. Moscow needs more predictability in NATO missile defense plans. Russia aims to cooperate with Western powers on security issues, but they want guarantees that the U.S. missile shield in Eastern Europe would not target its nuclear forces. It says we have failed to work jointly on this issue. The European missile defense programs are developing, and Russia's concerns are not being taken into account. Russian missile forces to field all new arsenal by 2021. Their strategic missile forces will be fully equipped with the 5th generation missile systems by 2021, says their defense ministry. It says their modern missiles, the RVSN, will reach around 60% by 2016 and 98% by 2021. They're being modernized, these missile forces, for Russia in a bid to enable them to penetrate the anti-missile defense systems being fielded by NATO and the U.S., Russian officials have said previously. Don't worry, this is all going to come together. It's not just Russian news. Russia to send delegates to NATO drills. Russia's defense ministry says it will send a delegation to the NATO military exercise in November called Steadfast 2013 from the 2nd to the 9th in Poland and the Baltic states. The North Atlantic Alliance has announced. They told journalists that the NATO-Russian Council that his country had received an invitation to the exercise, that a Russian delegation would take part. It says we plan to continue such transparency measures in the future. They include more than 80 military attaches. NATO Chief Rasmussen thanked Russia on Tuesday for inviting NATO observers to the Zapad 2013 exercises. NATO accepts Georgia's offer to join NATO Response Force. In his monthly press conference, NATO Secretary Rasmussen has said he expects Georgian troops to be available for NATO's Rapid Reaction Force in 2015. It says NATO's Rapid Reaction Force is ready to defend an ally, deploy anywhere and deal with the threats. Ukraine and Finland have also offered to join the exercise and have been accepted. The force is basically a number of 25,000 troops. Central Asia Pentagon is shifting Afghanistan logistics hub to Romania from Kyrgyzstan. I've covered this before. The Kyrgyzstan, basically the contract is expiring with the U.S. and they're not getting in as much money as they'd like, so it's told them to go. The Pentagon has begun shifting its Afghanistan air logistics hub to a base in Romania and will complete the transition from Manas Transit Center in Kyrgyzstan by the time its contract for that facility expires in July 2014. Then you have British Special Forces carrying out secret training missions or secret trainings in Azerbaijan. The Foreign and Commonwealth Office paid for the SAS to train Azerbaijan Special Forces in an effort to gain influence with the hardline ex-Soviet regime. It was in 2006 deployment. Members of the UK's elite fighting force taught their counterparts sniper skills, how to storm buildings as part of a 6-week training mission. Militarization warning for Antarctica as China and Iran show increasing interest. Iran and China in the Arctic. Australian academics have pointed to the dangers that Antarctic bases are for the first time being militarized, despite the continent officially being called a land of peace and science. The report highlights a Chinese base inland in the Australian Antarctic territory for satellite intelligence gathering potential, also Iran's interest in establishing a polar presence. Basically Russia's Federal Security Bureau or branch, whatever, suspects Russian bus bombing meant to embarrass Putin. The Russian intelligence suspects that the female suicide bomber killed 6 people on a bus did so in an effort to embarrass President Putin and undermine the government's promises that the 2014 Olympics in Russia will be secure. So besides the Olympics, I covered this in the last video about this older article from August where basically Saudi Arabia was trying to bribe Russia to stop supporting Syria, which is one of their main missions, the Gulf monarchies, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and all them. They were trying to get in there. It has to do with energy pipelines, I believe, running pipelines and through, besides creating refugees. And, Russia has an invested interest in not allow that to happen. So I find it kind of not timely. It may have nothing to do with it, but all these terrorists now coming up in southern Russia. I mean, it goes on and off, but right now it's hot. Ashton calls for military-grade drones in the European Union's airspace. A security strategy paper by the EU says that EU countries should use military-grade drones for border surveillance. They say Germany, France, Italy, and the UK already have the machines, but only use them in military-led operations. They want ones for both military and civilian operations, such as border control, monitoring agriculture and civilian infrastructure, natural disasters, and spying on their taxpayers. 2 feared dead as fighter jet crashes in Switzerland. It was in the mountainous area in the Alpine country, killing the 2 crew members. That's interesting. They just smacked into a wall. They didn't even eject or anything. But what I found interesting, because they're talking about F-18 Hornets, was that Switzerland bought 34 single and double-seated F-18s in 1996 built. Wednesday's accident came as the country is preparing to buy 22 Gripen JAS-39 fighters made by Sweden's Saab. Both houses of the Swiss parliament have approved the deal, which carries a price tag of 3 billion Swiss francs, but it remains highly controversial in Switzerland, with concerns raised over the spending cuts it will entail in other areas, and discussion over whether the neutral country should have a fighter jet fleet at all. A poll published last month indicated that 63% of the Swiss opposed the deal, which does not bode well for the likely popular vote to make the final decision. Maybe a little sabotage there, but U.S. drone strikes killed Pakistani grandmother and laborers, says Amnesty, I believe, International? Yeah. They say, we're really shocked, especially with the grandmother case. At first we thought that can't be true, but there's something more to this. People who are clearly no imminent threat to the U.S. are not fighting against the U.S. So I'm not very shocked. This has been happening for a while there. But all of a sudden, Amnesty International is making a big deal out of it. Pakistani Prime Minister meets with Obama and demands end to the drone strikes from the 23rd of October. So Sharif said the strikes have deeply disturbed and agitated the Pakistani people. Well, yeah, you had the one article I saw where the girl was saying at first it didn't really bother her, but now it's like hard to really do anything, keep your nerves, sleep, eat without, when you hear them, it just sends shivers down your spine. I think you're going to get blown up. U.S. drone strikes could be classed as a war crime. The joint report with the Human Rights Watch judges U.S. attacks in Yemen and Pakistan to have broken international human rights law. And they're talking about the double tap strikes. Like I said before, I've mentioned this many times. They blow some Al-Qaeda terrorists, at least that's what they call them. And when the families come to clean up the bodies, they drone strike and kill and blow them up as well. Double tap. NATO okays small defense advisory mission for Libya. Libya, right? Libya is like a beachhead now. It's not just a smuggling state for what they were using to basically supply these weapons for these terrorists that go all over, including southern Russia, but also into Syria and places in Africa. But it's also being used as a beachhead for refugees to go into Europe. Of course, that's half the reason for blowing up all these countries and stuff and creating all these basically crisis, they call them. It's not just a crisis, it's actually an operation, a very efficient operation of creating refugees. NATO says it is still setting up a small team of experts to advise Libya in building the country's defense institutions. She says the team won't have a permanent base in Libya but will operate from Brussels and comprise no more than 10 people. So when they're not trying to create refugees, they're actually going after the resources. U.S. after Africa's resources, says a journalist. They're aimed at attaining resources like oil, natural gas, other strategic minerals such as gold, diamonds, uranium, platinum, etc. The U.S. has a full-scale military base in the African continent, including Camp Lemonnier, located in the Horn of Africa. According to unclassified federal documents cited by Tribune Washington Bureau, hundreds of millions of dollars are now flowing into Africa to start and develop different projects. The U.S. is increasing investments in air facilities, flight services, telecom, and electrical upgrades. Lastly, the projects are part of a $1.2 billion plan in planned improvements over the next 25 years that will accelerate the camp's transformation from a makeshift installation into an enduring 600-acre base. The scramble for Africa's oil, you can type that in, you can read it from Charles Huff Smith. They're being bedeviled by the resource curse. The global scramble for Africa's estimated 25 billion barrels of oil is on. Those trying to secure or exploit the continent's fossil fuels, says here that includes each oil-rich nation's political and economic elites, international oil corporations, regional powers, trading blocs, that's like Russia, China, US, all them, Europe, EU, and the four major energy-hungry economic players, the EU, the US, Japan, and China. In geopolitical terms, oil-rich nations become areas of interest. That's where Al-Qaeda pops up, to neighboring states and energy-hungry global powers, further complicating and distorting national development, which is exactly what they're doing. Algeria, of course, then they're going to blame them for being poor and the flies on their head, and you got to donate the poor refugees that they're creating and the people that they're starving, and it's just a mind trip. In Algeria, they're saying it's the Arab world's often forgotten massive oil giant. So this is why they're covering it, right? Algeria plays a critical role in the international oil and gas market. It's the third largest natural gas producer in the Arab world after Qatar and Saudi Arabia, the leading gas exporter in Africa, and an energy supplier to France, Spain, Italy, Turkey, US, and China. Economists expect that Algeria could, double its oil and gas production in the next decade. So it's not just their 12 billion barrels of oil reserves. They have 160 trillion cubic feet of reserves of natural gas. Will Sudan be the next Syria? Well, if they have resources to be exploited and refugees to be created, they will. The comparisons are striking. Pretty interesting. So the Gulf states in the West, they basically lost, right, in Syria. So this is how they put it. The morbid lesson that Bashar al-Assad has taught the other Arab dictators. I guess they're talking about the Gulf monarchies, the same ones that were funding terrorists to behead and kill his people, and like the one story, shoot pregnant women in the bellies, and for a pack of cigarettes, right? Those Arab dictators. I don't know. Let's not worry about Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. Those are peaceful. Let's not look at those ones. Is that the same stubborn and brutal enough that they're, so basically saying that it's taught Arab dictators that if they're stubborn and brutal enough, their people and the international community will lose the stomach to risk facing the tragic repercussions that Syrians are experiencing. So it turned out to be peaceful protest about legitimate issues. It turned into all of a sudden non-Syrians, mostly non-Syrians, they called them rebels, flooding the country, wreaking havoc, raising hell, and so that's what they're saying. Ooh, a revolution is going to happen in Sudan. So 41 killed in an attack in South Sudan from October 20th. 41 people have been killed, 63 injured. U.S. is inflating threats in Africa to justify expansion. Deployed 200 Marines in Sicily for possible operations in Libya. UPI reports, look at this, U.S. operations in Africa are growing as the Islamist threat expands. So wherever you want to go and exploit, you send Al-Qaeda. You create the terrorists, then you bitch about terrorism, and then, overseas, and then you bring a massive police state and clamp down in your own country. Uganda's on alert over fears of a Kenya-style mall attack by a Somalian, right? Actually, it's from Norway. It was a Norwegian who's brainwashed in Somalia. So why not look at Norway? What's up with that? Now let's go to Africa. 13 killed in suicide bombing in Somalia. Shabab said the main target was Ethiopian and Djibouti troops who invaded our country. Amnesty International is calling for a probe into the recent Nigeria deaths. M23 rebels attacked 2 UN helicopters in the Congo. UN wants more troops in Mali. France will keep 2,000 troops in Mali. Then suicide bomber attacks UN troops in Mali. So there you go. that justifies the cause for invasion. Thank you.